The attorney's voice droned through the conference room like white noise, each word another nail in the coffin of Claire Bennett's hope. She sat rigid in the uncomfortable leather chair, her 14-year-old daughter Emma pressed against her side, while her brothers Marcus and Derek occupied the opposite end of the mahogany table with the casual confidence of men who'd already won. And to my eldest son, Marcus Bennett, I leave the family business, Bennett Marine Supply, valued at approximately $8.2 million, along with all commercial properties, investment portfolios, and the Connecticut estate. Marcus leaned back, expensive suit stretching across shoulders that had never known real work. His smile was practiced, professional, empty of everything except satisfaction. Beside him, Derek adjusted his Rolex, already calculating his share of their inheritance. The attorney cleared his throat, that particular sound of a man delivering bad news disguised as formality. And to my daughter, Claire Bennett, I leave my personal fishing gear and tackle collection, currently stored in the garage of the family home. The words hung in air like a bad joke waiting for a punchline that never came. Fishing gear. Claire's father had died 3 weeks ago. Massive heart attack while checking inventory at the warehouse he'd built from nothing over 40 years. She'd held his hand in the hospital during those final moments, listening to him whisper something about keeping what matters close, about looking beneath the surface. She thought he was delirious from a medication. Now, she understood he'd been trying to tell her something else entirely. Marcus chuckled, the sound oil-slick and cruel. Dad's old fishing stuff? Claire, that's basically garbage. Most of it's been sitting in the garage since before Mom died. Rusted hooks, tangled line, boxes that smell like 30-year-old bait. Derek joined in, his laughter sharper. Remember that tackle box he always took on those fishing trips? The dented orange one? Pretty sure it's held together with duct tape at this point. Classic Dad, leaving Claire exactly what she's worth. Emma's small hand tightened around Claire's. At 14, her daughter had already learned to recognize cruelty in its many forms. They'd survived 3 years since Emma's father had walked out. 3 years of Claire working double shifts as a medical transcriptionist to keep their apartment, to keep food on the table, to keep Emma in the private school her grandfather had insisted on paying for. That tuition money had stopped the day Claire's father died. The fishing equipment can be collected at your convenience. The attorney continued, clearly uncomfortable with the family dynamics unfolding in his office. The garage access code is included in your packet. Claire stood, pulling Emma close. She'd known this would happen. Her father had made his disappointment clear over the years, particularly after her divorce. Single mothers who couldn't keep their marriages together didn't deserve the same consideration as sons who'd married well, who'd produced grandchildren in stable, respectable homes. Never mind that Marcus was on his third wife. Never mind that Derek's picture-perfect family was held together by expensive therapy and prescription medications. They were men. They were successful. They fit the image her father had wanted to project. Claire was the failure, the divorced daughter, the one who'd chosen social work over business school, who'd married a musician instead of a lawyer, who'd embarrassed the Bennett name by working a middle-class job instead of living off family money. Claire. Marcus's voice stopped her at the door. Look, I know this seems harsh, but Dad was clear about his wishes. He wanted the business to stay in capable hands. You understand. She understood perfectly. She understood that her father had spent his final conscious moments trying to tell her something important, and she'd missed it. She understood that her brothers thought they'd won. She understood that the tackle box sitting in a garage somewhere held more meaning than they could possibly imagine. I'll pick up the fishing gear tomorrow, she said quietly. Thank you for your time. Outside, the October sun was too bright, too cheerful for the funeral they'd held yesterday. Emma walked beside her in silence until they reached the parking lot where Claire's 12-year-old Honda sat between Marcus's BMW and Derek's Mercedes. Mom, Emma said finally, her voice carrying the careful control of someone trying not to cry. It's not fair. No, baby. It's not. Uncle Marcus called Grandpa's tackle box garbage. Claire unlocked the car, her hands shaking slightly. Your uncles don't understand that some things have value beyond money. But we need money. Emma's voice cracked. Mrs. Henderson called yesterday about the tuition payment, and the rent is due next week. And I heard you on the phone with the electric company." Claire pulled her daughter into a fierce hug. At 14, Emma was already too aware of their financial struggles, already carrying burdens no child should have to bear. She was brilliant, artistic, sensitive in ways that reminded Claire of her own father before business had hardened him. "We'll figure out," Claire promised, even though she had no idea how. "We always do." The drive to their apartment took them through neighborhoods that grew progressively less affluent. From the pristine streets of her father's lawyer's office to the working-class area where they rented a 2-bedroom unit in a building that needed better maintenance and lower rent. That evening, Claire spread bills across their tiny kitchen table while Emma did homework in her room. The numbers didn't add up. They never did. Without her father's contribution to Emma's tuition, without the occasional help he'd provided for medical expenses or car repairs, the careful budget Claire maintained was already collapsing. She picked up her phone 3 times to call Marcus to beg for a loan for some portion of the inheritance that should have been hers. Each time, pride and the memory of his dismissive laughter made her set it back down. Instead, she pulled out the packet the attorney had given her. Inside was a single key on a Bennett Marine Supply keychain and an access code for the garage at her father's house. The house where she'd grown up. The house that now belonged to Marcus, who'd probably sell it within the month to buy something bigger, newer, more impressive. "Mom," Emma appeared in the doorway, sketchbook in hand. "I was thinking about Grandpa's tackle box." "What about it, honey?" Emma sat down, opening her sketchbook to reveal a drawing she'd made from memory. Claire's father standing beside a young Emma at the dock, teaching her to cast a line. The tackle box sat open beside them, orange and dented, exactly as Derek had described. Grandpa always said that box had everything he needed. He told me once that a good tackle box was like a treasure chest. You just had to know how to look at it. Claire studied the drawing, seeing details Emma had captured with an artist's precision. The way the tackle box's handle was wrapped in electrical tape. The specific pattern of dents and scratches on the metal surface. The careful organization of lures and hooks her father had maintained despite the box's battered exterior. "He did say that, didn't he?" Claire murmured. A memory surfaced. Her father in the garage. 10 years old Claire watching as he sorted through tackle, explaining the difference between surface lures and deep divers. He'd shown her a trick that day, how the tackle box had a false bottom that created extra storage space. He'd kept his most valuable lures there, the antique ones passed down from his own father. False bottom, looking beneath the surface. Keep what matters close. Claire's heart began to hammer in her chest. "Emma, grab your jacket. Where are we going?" "To get Grandpa's tackle box." The drive to her father's house took 20 minutes. The Tudor-style home sat in one of the city's most exclusive neighborhoods, its manicured lawn and security gate broadcasting wealth that Claire had once taken for granted. She pulled up to the gate and entered the code, half expecting it to have been changed already. The gate swung open. The garage access code worked too. Claire pulled into the 3-car space, noting her father's truck still parked in its usual spot. Marcus hadn't bothered to clear out the personal items yet, too focused on the valuable assets to worry about fishing gear and old tools. "There," Emma pointed to the metal shelving unit along the back wall, where decades of accumulated equipment created organized chaos. Fishing rods stood in corners. Nets hung from hooks, and on the bottom shelf, covered in dust but unmistakable, sat the orange tackle box. Claire lifted it carefully. The metal was cool under her fingers, the weight familiar from countless fishing trips. She could smell it through the closed lid, that distinctive scent of old bait and motor oil and lake water that had permeated the metal over years of use. "It's heavier than I remember," she said. Emma ran her hand over the dented surface. Grandpa used to say heavy meant well-stocked. They carried the tackle box to the car and drove home in silence, both of them feeling the weight of what might be inside. Claire's rational mind insisted it would be exactly what Marcus had described: old lures, rusted hooks, tangled fishing line. But something else, some deeper instinct, whispered that her father's final message had been intentional. Back in their apartment, Claire set the tackle box on the kitchen table. The latches were stiff from disuse but opened with determined pressure. The lid swung back, revealing the top tray exactly as she remembered it. Lures organized by type and color. Hooks in small compartments. Sinkers sorted by weight. Bobbers in various sizes. Everything meticulously arranged despite the box's shabby exterior. Her father had always been particular about organization, even his hobbies. Emma leaned close, studying the contents. "It looks normal." "The false bottom," Claire said, remembering that long-ago lesson. "He showed me once how it worked." She carefully lifted the top tray out, setting it aside. The main compartment below held more tackle, spools of fishing line, a fillet knife in a worn leather sheath, needle-nose pliers dark with age. All exactly as expected. But the bottom of the tackle box sat higher than the exterior depth suggested. Claire ran her fingers along the edges, finding the nearly invisible seam her father had shown her decades ago. There was a trick to it, pressure applied to specific corners in sequence. Left rear, right front, center. The false bottom clicked and rose slightly, revealing a hidden compartment beneath. Inside was a large manila envelope, sealed with packing tape that had yellowed with age. Across the front, in her father's blocky handwriting, for Claire. "Open privately." Claire's hands trembled as she broke the seal. Inside were documents, lots of them, bundled and labeled with the same meticulous care her father had applied to his tackle organization. She spread them across the table while Emma watched with wide eyes. The first bundle was labeled Primary Holdings. Inside were stock certificates, dozens of them, representing shares in companies Claire recognized. Tech giants that had grown from startups when her father had invested. Pharmaceutical companies that had developed blockbuster drugs. Energy companies that had struck it rich. Each certificate carefully preserved, each representing investments made over decades. The second bundle contained real estate deeds. Not the properties Marcus had inherited through the will, but others. Commercial buildings in developing neighborhoods that had since gentrified. Parcels of waterfront land that had appreciated astronomically. A warehouse complex that Claire recognized as the location of 3 successful tech startups. The third bundle held bank account information. Multiple accounts at different institutions, all in Claire's name, established years ago and maintained through automatic transfers from her father's business. The balances were staggering, millions accumulated and compounded over time. The fourth bundle contained bonds. Municipal bonds, corporate bonds, treasury bonds. A portfolio that would have made a hedge fund manager jealous. And at the bottom, a letter in her father's handwriting, dated 2 weeks before his death. "Dear Claire, if you're reading this, you found what I tried to tell you about in the hospital. I'm sorry I couldn't be more clear, but I knew there was a chance I wouldn't make it, and I couldn't risk Marcus or Derek learning about this too soon. The will I filed with the attorney was a test. I needed to see how your brothers would react when they thought they had everything. Their behavior today confirmed what I've suspected for years. They care only about money and status, not about family or the values I tried to teach them. You are reading this because you remembered. You remembered our fishing trips, our conversations, the lessons I tried to teach you about looking beneath the surface. You remembered that the most valuable things are often hidden in the most unexpected places. Everything in this tackle box represents the true Bennett fortune. The business I left to Marcus is successful, yes, but it's leveraged to the hilt. Most of its value is in real estate and inventory that will depreciate. I've been quietly moving liquid assets into these hidden investments for 20 years, ever since your mother died, and I realized my sons had learned all the wrong lessons from my success. The total value of what you're holding is approximately $245 million. I've structured everything to be completely legal and entirely yours. The accounts are already in your name. The properties are held in a trust that names you as the sole beneficiary. The stocks and bonds are bearer instruments that belong to whoever possesses them. Marcus and Derek will have the business, the house, the appearance of wealth. You will have actual financial security, the ability to live life on your own terms, to give Emma opportunities they can't take away. But Claire, this comes with a responsibility. This money isn't just for you. It's a tool to do good in the world. I know you want to be a social worker, to help people. Now you can do that on a scale most people only dream about. Start foundations. Fund programs. Make a real difference. Your brothers will never know about this unless you choose to tell them. The tackle box looked like garbage because I needed it to. I needed them to dismiss it, to let you take it without question. I needed you to have time to find this, to secure it before they realized what they'd missed. I'm proud of you, Claire. I always have been. I'm sorry I couldn't show it more clearly while I was alive. I was trying to protect this inheritance, to keep it hidden until the right moment. I hope you can forgive me for the pain my distance caused you. Use this well. Love Emma fiercely. Live fully. And maybe, occasionally, go fishing and remember your old dad who loved you more than you knew. Always, Dad. P.S. The vintage lures in the top tray are worth about $50,000 to collectors. Even the garbage had value if you knew how to look at it. Claire read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Emma pressed close, reading over her shoulder, her own eyes wide with disbelief. "Mom," Emma whispered, "is this real?" Claire looked at the documents spread across their kitchen table. Stock certificates representing ownership in some of the world's most successful companies. Deeds to properties in cities across the country. Bank statements showing balances that seemed fictional in their enormity. "It's real," she said, her voice shaking. "It's all real." They sat in silence for a long moment, the magnitude of the discovery slowly sinking in. Claire's mind raced through the implications. No more struggling to pay rent. No more panic over Emma's tuition. No more choosing between groceries and medical bills. But more than that, freedom, security, the ability to live without the constant weight of financial anxiety, the ability to help others who were struggling just as she had been. And her father had done it all in secret, protecting this inheritance from sons who would have squandered it, saving it for the daughter he'd pretended to disappoint. "What do we do now?" Emma asked. Claire gathered the documents carefully, her hands steadier now. "First, we secure all of this. Safety deposit box, attorney consultations, financial advisors. We do this right. And then we decide what kind of life we want to build. But Emma, this stays between us for now. Nobody else knows about this. Not your uncles, not friends, not anyone. Your grandfather protected this secret for 20 years. We need to be just as careful." Emma nodded solemnly. "What about Uncle Marcus and Uncle Derek?" Claire thought about her brothers, about their dismissive laughter in the attorney's office. They'd been so certain they'd won, so confident that the tackle box was worthless. They called her father's most precious possession garbage without a second thought. "They got exactly what Grandpa intended them to have," she said. "The business, the house, the appearance of success. Let them enjoy it." Over the next few days, Claire moved with quiet efficiency. She took a personal day from work, claiming she needed time to sort through her father's belongings, which was true in a way. She was sorting through his legacy, just not in the way anyone expected. She started with the bank accounts, visiting each institution with the necessary documentation to establish her access. The bankers were professional, barely blinking at the balances they confirmed. Money at this level apparently bought discretion. The stocks required consultation with a securities attorney, who verified the certificate's authenticity and helped Claire establish accounts to hold them properly. The vintage nature of some certificates required special handling, authentication from the original issuing companies. The real estate proved most complex. The properties were held in a trust her father had established years ago, with Claire named as successor trustee upon his death. The trust documents had been filed legally, but quietly, never appearing in the public reading. Another layer of protection her father had built. By the end of the week, Claire had a complete picture of her inheritance. The total came to $245.7 million once everything was properly valued and accounted for. Her father had been conservative in his letter estimate. She hired a wealth management firm that specialized in sudden wealth transition. They were accustomed to lottery winners, inheritance recipients, people whose lives changed overnight. They understood the need for discretion, for careful planning, for protection against the world's sudden interest in your money. The first thing people want to do is tell everyone, her advisor Sarah explained during their initial meeting. That's exactly what you shouldn't do. Take time, adjust, make thoughtful decisions about how you want this wealth to shape your life. I've already decided one thing, Claire said. I want to set up a foundation, something focused on supporting single parents, helping families in crisis. Sarah smiled. That's exactly the kind of purposeful approach that will make this inheritance meaningful. Let's build something that honors both your father's legacy and your own values. 2 weeks after the will reading, Claire received a call from Marcus. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Claire, I need to talk to you about Dad's business, he said, skipping pleasantries. There are some complications with the inheritance. What kind of complications? Apparently, the business has more debt than we realized. The commercial properties are mortgaged. The inventory financing is maxed out. I'm looking at having to sell everything just to break even. Claire absorbed this information, remembering her father's letter. I'm sorry to hear that, Marcus. What does your attorney say? That I'm legally responsible for all. The will was very clear about the business assets coming to me, including all associated liabilities. He paused. I was thinking, maybe you and I could talk about combining resources. You can invest in the business, help me turn it around. As family, the irony was almost painful. Her brother, who'd laughed at her inheritance of fishing gear, was now asking for help because the supposedly valuable business was drowning in debt. I don't have resources to invest, Marcus. I'm a medical transcriptionist. Remember? Right. Of course. His voice cooled. Well, if you happen to sell any of Dad's old fishing gear to collectors or something, keep me in mind. I could use any extra cash right now. After he hung up, Claire sat with Emma in their small living room. Your uncle asked if I'd sell Grandpa's fishing gear to help him. Emma looked up from her homework. What did you say? I told him I didn't have money to help him. Which was true. She didn't have money to help him. She had money to live her own life, to build her own future, to create something meaningful from her father's legacy. But she didn't have money to rescue brothers who'd spent their lives dismissing her, who'd learned all the wrong lessons from wealth, who saw family as a resource to exploit rather than a bond to cherish. 3 months later, Claire walked into the offices of the Bennett Foundation for Family Services. The suite occupied the top floor of a building in a revitalizing neighborhood. With views across the city and enough space for the staff, she was already hiring. Emma sat in one of the conference room chairs, sketching the view, while Claire met with her program directors. They were planning initiatives that would provide emergency assistance to families in crisis, fund childcare for single parents returning to school, offer job training and placement services. The first grants will go out next month, Sarah reported. We've already received over 200 applications. The need is overwhelming. Then we'll start with the most urgent cases and build from there, Claire decided. My father spent his life building wealth. I'm going to spend mine using it to help people build stability. That evening, Marcus called again. Claire almost didn't answer, but Emma encouraged her to pick up. I'm selling a house, Marcus said without preamble. The business is going into bankruptcy. Derek and I are liquidating everything Dad left us. I'm sorry, Marcus. Yeah, well, turns out the great Bennett fortune was mostly smoke and mirrors. Impressive on paper, worthless in reality. He paused. I saw something about a new foundation in the paper. The Bennett Foundation. That's you. Claire chose her words carefully. I'm involved with some charitable work, yes. Must be nice, having time for charity while some of us are trying to salvage our lives. But I guess you always were more interested in helping strangers than family. After he hung up, Claire looked at the documents spread across her dining room table. Grant applications from families just like hers had been. Single mothers working 2 jobs. Fathers laid off and struggling to keep their children housed and fed. People who needed help, who deserved help, who would never get help from men like Marcus who saw wealth as something to hoard rather than share. Do you think we should tell them? Emma asked quietly. Uncle Marcus and Uncle Derek? About what Grandpa really left you. Claire thought about her father's letter. About the test he designed. About the lesson he'd tried to teach sons who'd never learned to value anything beyond its price tag. No, she said finally. Grandpa was very clear. He wanted them to have the business and everything associated with it. That was his gift to them, the chance to learn what really matters. It's not our job to save them from the consequences of their choices. A year later, Claire stood on the dock at a lake house she'd purchased under a quiet LLC. It was modest by her means, but perfect for her purposes. A place where Emma could paint and swim, where they could host families from the foundation programs, giving them respite from city stress, where Claire could fish and remember her father. She opened the orange tackle box, its dents and scratches now precious rather than embarrassing. The vintage lures her father had mentioned remained in the top tray. She'd had them appraised, confirmed they were worth exactly what he'd said. But she hadn't sold them. Some things had value beyond their price. Emma appeared beside her, now 15 and already showing the strength and compassion Claire had hoped to nurture. What are you thinking about? Your grandfather. How he taught me to look beneath the surface. How the most valuable things are often hidden in the most unexpected places. Like rusty tackle boxes? Like rusty tackle boxes. Claire selected a lure, one of the ordinary ones rather than the valuable antiques, and attached it to her line. Want to fish? They spent the afternoon on the dock, Emma sketching between casts, Claire thinking about the foundation's growth and the families they'd helped. Marcus and Derek had disappeared into whatever life bankruptcy and humility had created for them. She occasionally saw their names in public records, business filings for new ventures that never quite succeeded. She could have helped them. The foundation's resources were more than sufficient. But her father had been clear about his intentions, and Claire understood now why he'd structured things as he had. Some people needed to learn that wealth without wisdom was worthless, that appearances without substance collapsed eventually, that family meant more than assets, and inheritance meant more than property. Her brothers had gotten everything they'd valued, and it had cost them everything that mattered. Claire had gotten what they'd dismissed as garbage, and it had given her everything she needed. As the sun set across the lake, painting the water in shades of gold and amber, Emma set down her sketchbook. Mom, do you think Grandpa knew? That we'd be okay? Claire thought about the tackle box, about the false bottom and the hidden fortune, about a man who'd spent 20 years protecting an inheritance that was never really about money. I think he knew exactly what he was doing, she said. I think he knew that the right person would remember, would look beneath the surface, would understand that treasure comes in the most unexpected forms. Do you miss him? Every day. But I also feel like he's still teaching me. Every time I help a family through the foundation, every time I remember to look deeper than the obvious, every time I choose substance over appearance. Emma nodded, understanding in ways that transcended her years. The tackle box was never about fishing, was it? No, baby. It was about learning to see value where others see garbage, learning to treasure what matters, learning that the best inheritances aren't the ones everyone can see. Claire cast her line into the darkening water, watching the lure arc and splash, sending ripples across the lake surface. Somewhere beneath those ripples, fish moved through depths her father had taught her to read. Not the obvious surface feeding, but the subtle signs of what lived below. She'd spent her life learning those lessons, reading beneath surfaces, finding value in unexpected places, understanding that the deepest truths were often the most carefully hidden. And now, with the foundation growing and Emma thriving and families across the city finding help when they needed it most, Claire understood the full scope of her inheritance. It wasn't $245 million. It was the wisdom to use that money well, the strength to protect it carefully, the vision to see opportunity where others saw only rust and decay, and the knowledge that her father's greatest gift hadn't been the money itself, but the trust that she would use it exactly as he'd hoped. As darkness settled over the lake, Claire and Emma gathered their gear and walked back toward the house. The tackle box sat between them, its dented orange surface catching the last rays of sunlight. It looked exactly as it had in Marcus's dismissive description: old, rusted, held together with tape, seemingly worthless. But they knew better. They'd learned to look beneath the surface, and that knowledge was worth more than any inheritance. The morning after Claire discovered the hidden fortune, she woke before dawn with Emma still sleeping peacefully in the next room. The documents from the tackle box were secured in a locked drawer, but their weight pressed on her consciousness like a physical presence. $245 million. The number seemed absurd, fictional, impossible to reconcile with the woman who'd lain awake 3 nights ago, calculating whether she could afford both electricity and groceries. She made coffee in their tiny kitchen, the familiar routine grounding her even as her mind spun with implications. Her phone showed 6 missed calls from her landlord about next month's rent, 3 emails from Emma's school about the overdue tuition, and a text from her supervisor asking if she could cover an extra shift this weekend. 24 hours ago, these messages would have triggered familiar panic. Now they felt like echoes from another life, problems that belonged to a version of Claire who no longer existed. But that woman had survived for 3 years. That woman had kept Emma fed and safe and loved despite impossible odds. That woman deserved respect, not erasure, even if her circumstances had fundamentally changed. Claire opened her laptop and began making lists. Not of what to buy or where to travel or how to spend the money, but of what needed to happen to protect it. Her father had trusted her with this inheritance. The least she could do was handle it with the same meticulous care he'd used to build it. First priority, legal representation. Not her father's attorney who'd read the will, the one Marcus and Derek knew, but someone independent. Someone who specialized in sudden wealth, who understood discretion, who could help her navigate the complex legal terrain of hidden inheritances and family dynamics. Second priority, financial management. The accounts existed, the stocks were real, the properties were legally hers. But raw assets needed structure, protection, strategy. She needed advisors who worked for her interests, not for commissions or their own portfolios. Third priority, security. Physical security for the documents, yes, but also operational security. Every transaction would leave traces. Every account access would create records. She needed to understand how to move through this new financial reality without broadcasting her changed circumstances to people who would react with jealousy, manipulation, or worse. Fourth priority, purpose. Her father's letter had been clear. This money wasn't just for her personal comfort. It was a tool for doing good, for making a difference. She needed to define what that meant before the money defined it for her. Emma appeared in the doorway, hair sleep-tousled, wearing the oversized t-shirt she preferred for pajamas. "You're up early. Couldn't sleep. Too much to think about." Emma poured herself orange juice and sat across from her mother. At 14, she had her father's artistic sensitivity but Claire's practical intelligence. The combination made her perceptive in ways that sometimes unsettled Claire. "Are you scared?" Emma asked. Claire considered the question honestly. Terrified, not of having the money, but of handling it wrong, of becoming someone I don't recognize, of losing what matters while protecting what we've gained. "Grandpa trusted you with this. He knew you'd be scared and gave it to you anyway. He also hid it in a tackle box for 20 years because he knew his own sons would waste it." Claire sipped her coffee. That's a pretty clear statement about what money does to people. You're not Uncle Marcus or Uncle Derek. No, but I don't want to be naive either. This amount of money changes things. Changes how people see you, how they treat you, what they expect from you. We need to be smart about this. Emma nodded slowly. "So what's the plan?" Over the next hour, Claire outlined her priorities. Emma listened, occasionally asking questions that showed she understood the gravity of their situation. When Claire finished, her daughter sat quietly for a moment before speaking. "I think we should move," Emma said finally. "Not right away, but eventually. This apartment, this neighborhood, everyone knows us here. They know we've been struggling. If suddenly things get better, people will notice. They'll ask questions." The observation was uncomfortably astute. Their neighbors had witnessed 3 years of financial hardship. The building manager had seen Claire negotiate payment plans for rent. Emma's school friends knew she wore thrift store clothes and couldn't afford the trips or activities they took for granted. Any visible improvement in their circumstances would trigger curiosity, speculation, gossip. and gossip had a way of reaching family members who'd already demonstrated their capacity for greed. "You're right," Claire admitted. "But we can't just disappear either. That would raise even more questions. What if it's gradual? You get a better job, we move to a nicer place, but nothing crazy. We just look like things are slowly improving." Claire studied her daughter with new appreciation. "When did you get so strategic?" "I've been thinking about this since last night. If we're going to protect what Grandpa left us, we need to be smarter than Uncle Marcus and Uncle Derek. And they're going to be watching, especially once they realize the business isn't as valuable as they thought." The assessment was cold but accurate. Marcus and Derek would be monitoring her, consciously or unconsciously, looking for signs that their father had left her something more substantial than fishing gear. Any dramatic change would draw their attention. "So we build a believable story," Claire said, thinking it through. "I get promoted at work or find a better position. That explains a modest increase in income. We move to a better apartment, but not luxury. Just something that makes sense for a single mother with a stable job." "And the foundation work?" Emma asked. "Grandpa said you should start helping people." "I will, but through structures that don't connect directly to me. Trusts, LLCs, anonymous donations. There are ways to do good without advertising your involvement." Emma traced patterns on the table with her finger. "It feels weird having to hide something good, like we're doing something wrong. We're not hiding it. We're protecting it. There's a difference." Claire reached across to squeeze her daughter's hand. "Your grandfather spent 20 years protecting this inheritance. He understood that some people see money as something to take, not something to share. We're being careful, not dishonest." "What about friends?" "My friends at school. Nothing changes there. You're still you. We're still us. We're just not advertising our changed circumstances." Emma nodded, but Claire could see the complexity of the situation settling on her daughter's shoulders. At 14, Emma was being asked to keep a secret that would fundamentally reshape their lives while maintaining the appearance of normalcy to everyone around them. "I know it's a lot to ask," Claire said gently. "If you need to talk about it, you talk to me. Not friends, not teachers, not counselors. Just me. Can you handle that?" "I can handle it. But Mom, what if I mess up? What if I accidentally say something?" "Then we adapt. This isn't about perfection. It's about being thoughtful and careful. If something slips, we deal with it together." The conversation was interrupted by Claire's phone ringing. "Marcus." She considered ignoring it, then remembered that normal behavior meant answering her brother's calls, even when she dreaded them. "Marcus, good morning." "Claire, I need you to do something." No pleasantries, no acknowledgement of the funeral or the will reading. Pure transactional communication. "I'm going through Dad's house this weekend, clearing out all the personal items before we list it for sale. I need you to come get anything else you want. Sunday, 10 a.m. Don't be late." The dismissive tone made her jaw tighten, but she kept her voice neutral. "I already collected what Dad left me. I don't need anything else. There's boxes of old photos, Mom's jewelry, miscellaneous items. If you don't want them, they're going to donation. Your call. Their mother's jewelry." Claire had assumed Marcus would have claimed that already, given it to his wife, or sold it. The fact that he was offering it suggested he'd already evaluated and dismissed it as insufficiently valuable. "I'll be there," she said. "Fine. And Claire, if you happen to find any paperwork, financial documents, anything like that, bring it to me. Dad was disorganized at the end. I'm still finding accounts and assets that weren't in the will." The request made Claire's stomach tighten. Marcus was searching for hidden assets, for anything their father might have tucked away. He hadn't found the tackle box fortune, had no idea it existed, but he was looking. "I'll let you know if I find anything," she said, which was technically true. She just wouldn't specify what she'd already found. After Marcus hung up, Emma looked at her mother with concern. "He's looking for more money. He's always looking for more money. But he won't find what he's looking for." Claire stood, decision crystallizing. "Come on. We have work to do before Sunday." They spent Saturday securing the inheritance. Claire rented a safety deposit box at a bank across town, somewhere neither Marcus nor Derek would have any reason to visit. She transferred the stock certificates, the bonds, the most sensitive documents. Everything that could be physically secured was locked away, accessible only to her. The real estate deeds were more complex. The properties were already in the trust her father had established, but Claire needed to understand exactly what she owned and how the trust was structured. She contacted 3 different law firms before finding one that specialized in estate planning and asset protection, requesting consultations for Monday. The bank accounts required personal visits to each institution. Claire dressed carefully for these meetings, professional but not wealthy, presenting herself as a woman who'd unexpectedly inherited accounts her father had set up years ago, which was completely true, just not complete. The bankers were uniformly professional. At this level of wealth, discretion was expected, valued, protected. They verified her identity, updated the contact information, established secure access protocols. Several offered wealth management services, but Claire politely declined. She'd choose her own advisors on her own timeline. By Saturday evening, Claire had a clearer picture of what she'd inherited. The total came to $245.7 million once everything was properly accounted for, slightly higher than her father's estimate. The investments had performed well in the weeks since his death. She also had a growing list of professionals she needed to consult: estate attorneys, tax specialists, wealth managers, accountants. People who could help her navigate the complex legal and financial terrain of sudden wealth without broadcasting her changed circumstances. "This is like a second job," Emma observed, watching her mother organize contact information and appointment schedules. "It is a job. Managing wealth is work, serious work. People think money solves all problems, but really it just trades one set of problems for another. Better problems though, right?" Claire thought about the stress of the past 3 years, the constant fear of eviction, the nights she'd lain awake calculating which bills could be delayed. Different problems. Not necessarily better, just different. Sunday morning arrived gray and cold, October asserting itself with the first real chill of autumn. Claire dressed in her usual thrift store jeans and sweater, the outfit of a woman for whom a family estate clearance was just another weekend errand. Emma came along, curious to see the house where her mother had grown up. Marcus's BMW was already in the driveway when they arrived. Through the windows, Claire could see Derek and his wife sorting through items in the living room, creating piles of keep, donate, and trash. "Remember," Claire murmured to Emma as they approached the door, "we're just here for photos and Mom's jewelry. Nothing else." Marcus opened the door, his expression the same dismissive neutrality he'd shown at the will reading. "Claire, Emma, good timing. We're almost done with the living room. The jewelry is upstairs in Mom and Dad's bedroom, still in her dresser. Photos are boxed in the den." Derek appeared behind him, carrying a box labeled Donate. "Hey, Claire. Fair warning, most of Mom's jewelry is costume stuff. We already pulled anything valuable for Marcus's wife, but you're welcome to the rest." The casual cruelty was so familiar it barely registered. Of course they'd taken the valuable pieces first. Of course they'd left Claire the scraps. That was how Marcus and Derek operated, taking what they wanted and framing the leftovers as generosity. "Thank you," Claire said, keeping her voice even. "I appreciate you thinking of me." She led Emma upstairs, away from her brother's assessment and dismissal. The master bedroom looked exactly as she remembered it. Her mother's dresser still topped with the same framed photos, the same jewelry box in the same position. Emma opened the box carefully. Inside were brooches, earrings, necklaces, most of it costume jewelry, as Derek had said. But there were also pieces Claire remembered her mother wearing: a simple gold locket that had belonged to Claire's grandmother, a pearl bracelet her father had given her mother on their 20th anniversary, a small emerald ring that was probably real but too modest to interest Marcus's wife. "These are beautiful," Emma whispered, touching the locket gently. "Your grandmother loved jewelry, but she wasn't ostentatious about it. She preferred pieces with meaning over pieces with price tags." As Emma explored the jewelry box, Claire opened the dresser drawers, ostensibly checking for anything else of sentimental value. The top drawer held scarves and gloves. The second drawer contained her mother's private papers, old letters, birthday cards, photos not formal enough for framing. In the back of the third drawer, beneath sweaters her mother had rarely worn, Claire found a small leather journal. She opened it carefully, recognizing her mother's handwriting on the first page. December 15th, 1998. Thomas told me today about the trust he's setting up for Claire. He's worried about the boys, about how money has changed them. He wants to protect at least one of our children from the corruption of wealth. I told him Claire was strong enough to handle it, and he said that's exactly why she should have it. The strong ones deserve protection too. Claire's hands shook as she flipped through the pages. Her mother had known. Not the details, perhaps, but the broad strokes. She'd known her husband was setting aside assets for Claire, protecting an inheritance from sons who'd learned all the wrong lessons. There were other entries scattered over years. Notes about Claire's divorce, about her struggles as a single mother, about her mother's frustration that she couldn't help more directly without alerting Marcus and Derek to resources they'd try to claim. The final entry was dated 6 months before her mother's death. Thomas is getting older, more focused on legacy. He's convinced the boys will destroy themselves with the business. Too much debt, too much expansion, too much ego. He's quietly restructuring assets, moving resources into Claire's trust. I asked if he'd tell her before he dies, and he said only if she remembers to look beneath the surface. He's building a test, a final lesson. I hope she passes it. I hope she finds what he's leaving her and uses it wisely. Our daughter deserves that chance. Claire closed the journal, emotion thick in her throat. Both her parents had known. Both had been part of this long game of protection and deception, hiding an inheritance from sons who couldn't be trusted with it, saving it for a daughter they believed would use it well. Mom, Emma's voice pulled her back to the present. Are you okay? Yeah, baby. Just found something at Grandma's. I'm going to keep this journal. They packed the jewelry box and the journal, along with selected photos from the den. Marcus barely glanced at what they were taking, too focused on the valuable items he and Derek were claiming. When Claire mentioned finding the journal, he waved dismissively. If it's not financial documents, I don't care what you take. On the drive home, Emma examined the jewelry while Claire processed the discovery of her mother's journal. Another piece of the puzzle, another confirmation that this inheritance was an accident or last-minute decision. It was years in the planning, years of protection, years of trust that Claire would prove worthy. The pressure of that trust was almost overwhelming. What if she made mistakes? What if she wasted this carefully protected fortune? What if she proved her parents wrong? You're thinking too loud, Emma said quietly. Sorry, just processing. Grandma knew too. About the money. She did. They both did. They spent years protecting this for me. Then they believed you could handle it. Maybe you should believe it too. Claire glanced at her daughter, seeing wisdom beyond her years. When did you get so smart? Probably genetics. I have pretty impressive grandparents. Monday brought Claire's first consultation with Catherine Wells, an estate attorney whose firm specialized in sudden wealth management. Catherine's office occupied a discreet suite in a downtown high-rise, the kind of place that broadcasts competence rather than flash. Ms. Bennett, thank you for coming in. Catherine was perhaps 60, silver-haired, with the calm assurance of someone who'd guided hundreds of clients through financial transitions. I've reviewed the preliminary information you provided. This is quite a substantial inheritance. My father was very thorough. So I see. The trust structure is particularly sophisticated. Your father clearly had expert legal guidance when he established this. Catherine spread documents across her conference table. The good news is that everything is legally sound. The properties, the accounts, the investments, all properly structured and documented. The challenge is going to be managing the transition without triggering unwanted attention. That's exactly what I'm worried about. My brothers inherited the family business. They have no idea about these additional assets, and I prefer to keep it that way. Catherine nodded. Understood. The trust structure actually helps with that. The properties are held under an LLC that's owned by the trust. The accounts are in your name, but at different institutions than your family traditionally used. The stocks are bearer certificates, so ownership is based on possession rather than registration. What about taxes? Your father handled that brilliantly. He's been paying taxes on these assets for years through the trust structure. The IRS already knows they exist, They're just not connected to his estate because technically they've been yours since the trust was established. Claire absorbed this, appreciation for her father's planning growing. So I can access these funds without going through probate? The trust assets, yes. They're already yours, have been for years. The accounts in your name simply need you to update contact information and access codes. It's all very clean. Too clean. Claire asked. My brothers are going to be suspicious if they realize Dad had assets that didn't go through probate. They need a reason to look, Catherine pointed out. As far as they know, everything was in the will. Unless you give them reason to investigate further, they'll never know these assets exist. Over the next hour, Catherine walked Claire through the mechanics of managing her inheritance. How to access accounts without creating suspicious paper trails. How to structure charitable giving to maintain anonymity. How to invest and grow the wealth without broadcasting her involvement. The key is patience, Catherine explained. You don't need to do everything immediately. Take time to understand what you have, to develop a strategy, to build relationships with advisors you trust. Sudden wealth that's managed thoughtfully tends to last. Sudden wealth that's spent impulsively tends to disappear. I'm not interested in spending it impulsively. My father's letter was clear about using this for good, for helping people. Catherine smiled. Then you're already ahead of most of my clients. Let's talk about foundation structures and how to maximize impact while maintaining privacy. By the time Claire left Catherine's office, she had a roadmap, not just for managing the money, but for protecting it, growing it, and using it purposefully. She also had referrals to other professionals, a wealth manager who specialized in socially responsible investing, an accountant who understood complex trust structures, a philanthropic advisor who could help design effective giving strategies. Tuesday brought meetings with two of those referrals. The wealth manager, David Chun, met her at his firm's offices where he presented a comprehensive analysis of her current holdings. Your father built a remarkable portfolio, David said, highlighting various investments on his computer screen. Tech stocks purchased in the early days of companies that became giants. Real estate in neighborhoods before they gentrified. Bonds timed to capture optimal rates. This wasn't luck. This was sophisticated analysis over decades. Can we maintain that sophistication while also aligning with my values? Claire asked. I don't want investments in companies that exploit workers or destroy the environment. Absolutely. ESG investing, environmental, social, and governance factors has come a long way. We can structure a portfolio that maintains growth while excluding companies that don't meet your ethical standards. They spent hours reviewing options, developing strategies. David recommended maintaining the core holdings her father had built. They were solid investments that would continue to appreciate, while gradually diversifying into impact-focused funds that supported sustainable businesses and social good. Wednesday's meeting with the philanthropic advisor, Maria Santos, opened Claire's eyes to the world of strategic giving. Most people think charity is about writing checks, Maria explained. But effective philanthropy is about systemic change, about addressing root causes rather than symptoms, about building sustainable solutions. I want to help families like mine, Claire said. Single parents struggling to survive, kids who deserve opportunities they can't afford. That's where my heart is. Maria nodded. Then let's design programs that address the structural issues keeping those families trapped. Not just emergency assistance, though that has its place, but education support, job training, childcare resources, financial literacy. Things that help people build stable lives rather than just surviving crises. They discussed foundation structures, grant-making strategies, program development. Maria helped Claire understand that $245 million, properly deployed, could transform thousands of lives if managed strategically rather than sentimentally. The key is sustainability, Maria emphasized. You don't want to spend down the principal and have nothing left in 20 years. You want to use the investment returns to fund programs indefinitely. That way your impact compounds over time. By Thursday, Claire's head was spinning with information. She'd met with attorneys, financial advisors, philanthropic consultants. She'd reviewed trust documents, investment portfolios, real estate holdings. She'd developed strategies for growth, giving, and protection. She'd also maintained her regular life, working her transcription job, helping Emma with homework, paying bills that no longer terrified her but still needed attention. The duality was exhausting, living two lives simultaneously, one visible and struggling, one hidden and secure. That evening, Marcus called again. "Claire, I need to ask you something." His voice carried tension she hadn't heard before. "Did Dad ever mention having accounts at other banks? Investments you knew about?" Claire's pulse quickened, but she kept her voice calm. "He never discussed finances with me, Marcus. You know that." "What?" "Because the business books aren't adding up. There's money missing or moved or something. The accountants are finding gaps in the records, transfers to accounts we can't identify. Maybe you should ask his accountant." "His accountant died last year. Dad handled everything himself after that." Marcus paused. "I'm starting to think he was hiding assets, moving money out of the business before he died." "Why would he do that?" "To avoid taxes, to protect assets from creditors. Hell, maybe he had a second family we don't know about. But something's off, Claire, and I need to find it before the business completely implodes." After Marcus hung up, Claire sat in the growing darkness of their apartment. Her brother was getting desperate, realizing that the inheritance he'd counted on was more liability than asset. Soon that desperation would sharpen into suspicion, into investigation, into potential discovery. She needed to move faster, to establish her new reality before Marcus's investigation turned in her direction. Friday morning, Claire called her supervisor at the medical transcription company. "Linda, I need to talk to you about my position here." "Is everything okay, Claire? Your work has been excellent, as always." "Everything's fine. Better than fine, actually. I've received a small inheritance from my father. Nothing major, but enough that I can afford to reduce my hours. I like to move to part-time, maybe 20 hours a week instead of 40. There was a pause while Linda processed this. "I hate to lose you full-time, but I understand. Family circumstances change. Let me check the schedule and see what we can accommodate." The conversation felt surreal. Claire was voluntarily reducing her income while secretly sitting on a fortune that could fund lifetimes of comfortable living. But the reduction was strategic, the first step in building the cover story Emma had suggested. A gradual improvement in circumstances, not a sudden windfall. Linda called back within an hour. "I can offer you 3 days a week, flexible scheduling. It'll be a pay cut, obviously, but still benefits eligible." "That's perfect. Thank you, Linda." With her work schedule reduced, Claire had time to focus on building the foundation. She met with Catherine Wells again to establish the legal structures, creating an LLC that would own the foundation, insulating her personal name from public records. "We'll call it the Lighthouse Foundation," Claire decided, helping families find their way through storms. Good name, meaningful without being obvious. Catherine made notes. "And you want to maintain anonymity as the founder?" "Complete anonymity. I'll be listed as executive director," which is honest, but no mention of my connection to the funding source. Smart, especially given your family situation. The foundation paperwork was filed on a rainy Tuesday in November. By Thanksgiving, Claire had hired the foundation's first employee, a program coordinator named Jennifer, who had 15 years of experience in family services. Together, they began developing the grant application process, establishing criteria for assistance, building the infrastructure that would transform money into meaningful help. Emma adapted to their changing circumstances with remarkable grace. She understood the need for secrecy, the importance of maintaining their modest lifestyle, despite the security beneath it. When friends asked why she couldn't afford certain activities, she shrugged and explained that her mom was still working, still budgeting, just getting by like always. Which was technically true. They were getting by. They just had $245 million in reserve. December brought the first real test of Claire's commitment to discretion. Emma's school held its annual winter fundraiser, asking families to contribute to the scholarship fund that helped students from low-income families afford tuition. In past years, Claire had donated what she could, usually $50 scraped together from careful budgeting. This year, she could easily write a check for the entire scholarship fund, could endow it permanently, could ensure that no child ever had to leave the school for financial reasons. "What do I do?" she asked Catherine during one of their regular check-ins. What would you have done before the inheritance? Donated $50, maybe $75 if I'd had a good month. Then do that. Make your anonymous major donation through the foundation, but personally give what you would have given anyway. Consistency is key to maintaining your cover. So Claire wrote a check for $75 to the school fundraiser, handing it to the development office with the same modest pride she'd felt in previous years. And then, through the Lighthouse Foundation, she arranged an anonymous donation of $500,000 to endow the school's scholarship program permanently. The announcement came 2 weeks later. An anonymous donor had fully funded the scholarship program, ensuring that qualified students would never be denied access to education for financial reasons. The school was ecstatic. The families who depended on those scholarships were tearful with gratitude. And Claire sat in the audience during the announcement assembly, holding Emma's hand, watching the impact of her father's legacy transform lives while no one knew she was responsible. That was us, Emma whispered. We did that. That was Grandpa, Claire whispered back. We're just the tools he's using to make it happen. Christmas approached, and with it came the expected invitation to Marcus's house for the family gathering. Claire almost declined, uncomfortable with the thought of celebrating alongside brothers who were drowning in debt while she sat on a fortune. But refusing would raise questions, break patterns, suggest something had changed. So she and Emma showed up on Christmas Eve with modest gifts, store-bought cookies, and the appearance of a family still struggling to make ends meet. Marcus's house was notably less decorated than previous years, the catering replaced with home cooking, the expensive wines absent from the table. Tight year, Marcus explained when Claire commented on the simpler celebration. Business has been challenging. I'm sorry to hear that. Derek joined them in the kitchen, his expression troubled in ways Claire had never seen. It's more than challenging. We're looking at bankruptcy if we can't restructure the debt. Dad left us a mess, Claire. The business looked successful, but it was all leverage and credit. Now that he's gone, creditors are calling in loans. What will you do? Sell everything, probably. The business, the properties, whatever we can liquidate. Start over. Derek poured himself a generous glass of wine. It's humiliating. After years of thinking we were set for life, we're back to zero. Claire felt a complex mixture of sympathy and vindication. Her brothers were experiencing the consequences of valuing wealth over wisdom, of choosing appearance over substance. Their father had tried to teach them different lessons, and they'd failed to learn. But they were still her brothers, still family, despite everything. If there's anything I could do to help, she offered, knowing the words were hollow. She couldn't help, not without revealing her inheritance, and revealing it would destroy the protection her father had built. Unless you're sitting on a secret fortune, there's nothing anyone can do, Marcus said bitterly. We've exhausted every option. The irony of his words was almost painful. After Christmas, Claire threw herself into foundation work. They'd received over 300 applications for assistance in the first month alone, each one representing a family in crisis, a single parent struggling to survive, children who deserved better than their circumstances allowed. Jennifer helped her sort through them, establishing priorities, identifying the cases where intervention would make the biggest difference. This one, Jennifer said, highlighting an application from a single mother in the city's east side. Maria Rodriguez, working 2 jobs, 3 kids, recently evicted. She's applied for emergency housing assistance. Claire read the application, seeing her own life reflected in Maria's circumstances. Different details, but the same desperate math of insufficient income and overwhelming expenses. Approve it. Full housing assistance for 6 months, plus job training resources and childcare support. That's generous. Most agencies would give 1 month, maybe 2. Most agencies aren't trying to actually solve problems. They're just putting band-aids on symptoms. Claire remembered Maria Santos's advice about systemic change. 6 months gives her time to stabilize, to get training, to find better employment. That's how we help people build sustainable lives. Over the next month, the Lighthouse Foundation approved assistance for 47 families. Emergency housing, medical bill payment, job training, childcare support, educational resources. each grant carefully designed to provide not just temporary relief, but pathways to stability. The impact was immediate and visible. Families who'd been facing eviction found housing. Parents who'd been trapped in minimum wage cycles got training for better jobs. Children who'd been struggling in underfunded schools received tutoring and educational support. And Claire watched it all from her modest apartment, still driving her 12-year-old Honda, still shopping at thrift stores, still maintaining the appearance of a struggling single mother who was just getting by. January brought a new challenge. Emma's school announced a major fundraising campaign for facility improvements. The goal was $2 million over 5 years. The development office sent letters to all families, asking for contributions at whatever level they could manage. Claire stared at the letter, calculating. She could fund the entire campaign tomorrow. One check, anonymous or otherwise, and the school would have everything it needed. But Catherine's voice echoed in her mind. Consistency is key to maintaining your cover. She donated $100 to the campaign, the amount a family at her supposed income level could reasonably contribute. And then, through a carefully structured series of anonymous gifts routed through the Lighthouse Foundation, she ensured the campaign would exceed its goal within 6 months. The school never knew the two donations came from the same source. February marked 4 months since Claire had discovered her inheritance. In that time, she'd established the foundation, helped nearly 100 families, made strategic investments that had grown the principal by another $8 million, and maintained perfect secrecy about her changed circumstances. She'd also watched Marcus and Derek spiral deeper into financial crisis. The business was in bankruptcy court. The family home had been sold. Both brothers had downsized dramatically, their wealthy lifestyles collapsing under the weight of debt and mismanagement. It was Derek who called her on a cold Tuesday evening, his voice carrying a desperation that made Claire's chest tighten. "Claire, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "Okay. Did Dad leave you anything else? Anything besides the fishing gear?" Claire's heart hammered, but she kept her voice steady. "Why would you ask that?" "Because nothing makes sense. The business is worthless. Actually worse than worthless because of all the debt. Marcus and I have been going through Dad's records, trying to understand where all the money went. He had income for 40 years, substantial income, and somehow there's nothing left except liabilities. Maybe he spent it on what? He lived modestly. The house was paid off. He didn't travel extensively, didn't collect expensive things, didn't gamble. The money should be somewhere, but we can't find it." Claire chose her words carefully. "Derek, I got a tackle box full of old fishing gear. You were there when the will was read. You laughed at what he left me, remember? I know what we saw. But Claire, I'm drowning here. My family is losing everything. If there's money somewhere, if Dad hid assets or set up accounts we don't know about, I need to find them. My kids' futures depend on it." The manipulation was obvious, the appeal to family loyalty, but beneath it Claire heard genuine desperation. Derek was scared, probably for the first time in his entitled life. "I don't know what to tell you," she said honestly. "I wish I could help." After Derek hung up, Claire sat with Emma in their small living room. "They're getting suspicious. They still don't know anything for sure," Emma pointed out. "Uncle Derek is guessing, hoping, but he doesn't have evidence. Not yet. But if they keep digging, if they hire forensic accountants or investigators, they might find traces of the trust, the accounts, the properties. Would that be so bad? I mean, it's legally yours. They can't take it even if they find out about it." Claire thought about this. Emma was right, technically. The inheritance was legally protected, structured through trusts and legal entities that her brothers couldn't touch. But knowledge of its existence would poison what remained of their family relationship, would transform suspicion into certainty, resentment into hatred. "I don't want them to know," she said finally. "Not because I'm afraid they'll take it, but because I'm afraid of what that knowledge will do to them. Right now, they think they got everything and lost it through their own poor management. If they learn I have $245 million they didn't know about, they'll never accept responsibility for their failures. They'll blame Dad, blame me, blame everyone except themselves. So we keep hiding it. We keep protecting it. Same as Grandpa did for 20 years. March brought spring, and with it, a new opportunity. Claire's apartment building was being sold, and the new owners were significantly raising rents. The increase would have been catastrophic for the woman Claire had been 4 months ago. For the woman she was now, it was barely noticeable. But it was also the perfect excuse for the gradual improvement Emma had suggested. Claire found a modest 2-bedroom apartment in a better neighborhood. Not luxury, not even upper middle class, but a clear step up from where they'd been. Safer streets, better schools, a building with working heat and responsive maintenance. "I got a promotion at work," she explained to curious neighbors. Finally able to afford something nicer. The lie came easily, smoothly, because it contained elements of truth. She had reduced her hours of the transcription job, which in a strange way was a promotion, giving her time to focus on more meaningful work. She could afford something nicer. She just wasn't mentioning the $245 million that made afford a meaningless concern. Emma adapted to the new apartment with visible relief. Her own bedroom, properly sized. A kitchen with counter space. A bathroom that didn't have permanent stains. Windows that looked out onto trees rather than parking lots. "It's still not mansion level," Emma observed. Uncle Marcus wouldn't be impressed. Uncle Marcus's opinions stopped matching the day he laughed at Grandpa's tackle box, Claire replied. "We're building the life we want, not the life that impresses people who've learned all the wrong lessons about value." April marked 6 months since the discovery. The Lighthouse Foundation had helped 183 families, providing over $2.3 million in direct assistance and support services. Claire's investment portfolio had grown to $267 million through careful management and strategic deployment of resources. And her brothers had filed for bankruptcy, liquidating everything their father had left them, starting over with nothing except the lessons they'd finally been forced to learn. Marcus called on a Thursday evening, his voice empty of the entitled confidence Claire had always associated with him. "Claire, I wanted you to know that Derek and I are moving. We've both found jobs in different cities. Marcus out west, me down south. We're starting over. I'm sorry it came to this. Yeah, well, maybe it needed to happen. Maybe Dad knew we needed to lose everything before we could understand what actually matters." He paused. "I wanted to apologize for how we treated you. At the will reading, after the funeral, all those years before. You deserved better from us." The apology surprised her. "Thank you for saying that. For what it's worth, you're handling your life better than we ever did. Single mother, working hard, raising Emma right. That takes real strength. Dad probably saw that in you. Valued it even if he couldn't show it. If only you knew," Claire thought, "how right you are about what Dad valued." After Marcus hung up, Claire felt an unexpected sadness. Her brothers were leaving, scattered by consequences of their own choices. The family that had been fractured by her father's death was now completely splintered, potentially beyond repair. But Emma came and sat beside her, radiating the quiet strength that reminded Claire why her father had chosen her for this inheritance. "We're still family," Emma said. "Me and you. That's enough." "Yeah, baby, that's enough." May brought warmth and renewal. The Lighthouse Foundation expanded its staff, hiring 2 more program coordinators and a grants manager. They'd received over 1,000 applications for assistance, each representing a family that needed help, that deserved the kind of support Claire's father's fortune could provide. Claire sat in the Foundation's modest offices, which occupied a suite in a nonprofit building rather than prestigious downtown space, reviewing applications with Jennifer. "We're making a real difference," Jennifer said, showing Claire success stories from families they'd helped. Maria Rodriguez, the single mom we assisted in January, she completed job training and got hired as a medical assistant. Now she's earning enough to support her family without assistance. That's what we're trying to do. Not just rescue people from crisis, but help them build sustainable lives. And we're doing it. The model is working. That evening, Claire drove Emma to the lake house she'd purchased the month before. It was modest by the standards of the wealthy, just a simple cabin on 5 acres, but it was theirs. A place to escape, to fish, to remember where this journey had started. They sat on the dock as the sun set, the orange tackle box between them. Claire had brought it specifically wanting to mark the occasion of their transformation. 6 months ago, we were terrified, Claire said. Didn't know if we could pay rent, if I could afford your tuition, if we'd have to move in with strangers or accept charity we couldn't repay. Now we're the ones providing the charity, Emma added. Now we understand what Grandpa was trying to teach us. That wealth isn't about luxury or status. It's about security and opportunity and the power to help others. Emma traced the dents in the tackle box with her finger. Do you think he knew that we'd figure it out? I think he hoped. I think that's why he structured everything so carefully, protected it so thoroughly. He was giving us a chance to prove we'd learned the lessons Marcus and Derek never could. As darkness settled over the lake, they opened the tackle box one more time. The vintage lures still sat in the top tray, worth $50,000 to collectors, but priceless to Claire. Beneath them, the false bottom remained, now empty of the documents that had changed their lives, but still significant as the container that had held their transformation. We should keep it forever, Emma said. The tackle box. As a reminder. Of what? Of how treasure comes in the most unexpected forms. Of how the things other people call garbage can hold everything that matters. Claire pulled her daughter close, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. Yeah, baby. We'll keep it forever. The tackle box that Marcus and Derek had dismissed, that they'd laughed at, that they'd thought represented their father's final insult to his daughter, sat between them on the dock. Dented, rusty, held together with tape, and more valuable than anything her brothers had inherited. Not because of what it had contained, but because of what it represented. A father's faith, a family's wisdom, and the understanding that true wealth was measured not in bank balances, but in what you built with them. 6 months of secrets, of careful management, of strategic giving. 6 months of watching her brothers lose everything while she quietly transformed lives. And this was only the beginning. Summer arrived with the kind of heat that made the city shimmer, transforming asphalt into mirrors and turning Claire's thoughts toward the lake house with increasing frequency. The lighthouse foundation had settled into productive rhythm, processing applications, disbursing grants, tracking outcomes. In 8 months, they'd helped 247 families, invested $4.2 million in direct assistance, and built a reputation in the nonprofit community as an unusually effective organization with mysteriously deep pockets. We're getting attention, Jennifer warned during their Monday morning meeting. Good attention, but attention nonetheless. People are asking questions about our funding sources. Claire had anticipated this. Anonymous donors could only remain anonymous for so long before curiosity became investigation. What kind of questions? Who's behind the foundation? Where does the money come from? How can a startup nonprofit deploy this kind of capital? Jennifer consulted her notes. The community foundation called last week asking if we'd be interested in partnership opportunities. The mayor's office wants to meet about expanding our programs citywide. What did you tell them? That we're a private foundation with a single anonymous donor who values discretion. That we're focused on direct family assistance rather than administrative partnerships. That we appreciate the interest but aren't looking to expand beyond our current mission. Claire nodded approval. Perfect. Polite but firm boundaries. The problem is, the more successful we become, the harder it gets to stay invisible. Success attracts attention. It was a problem Claire had been wrestling with for months. How do you do significant good while remaining anonymous? How do you transform lives without people asking whose money was doing the transforming? Her father had managed it for years through the quiet generosity Maggie and others in Pine Haven had described, but that was a small town where discretion was valued and questions weren't pushed. The city was different. Here, money meant power, and power meant people wanted to know who held it. We stay the course, Claire decided. Help families, track outcomes, maintain boundaries. If pressure increases, we'll adapt. But we don't compromise the donor's anonymity. After the meeting, Claire drove to Emma's school for the end-of-year ceremony. Her daughter had thrived over the past 8 months. The security of their changed circumstances manifesting in improved grades, expanded creative projects, and a confidence that came from knowing the floor wouldn't drop out from beneath them. Emma received 3 awards: Excellence in Art, Outstanding Community Service, and a Headmaster's Prize for Character. Claire watched from the audience, pride swelling in her chest. Her daughter was growing into exactly the kind of person Claire's father had hoped to nurture, someone who understood that privilege carried responsibility, that wealth was a tool for good rather than a symbol of status. After the ceremony, Emma's art teacher approached Claire. "Ms. Bennett, I wanted to talk to you about Emma's talent. She's genuinely gifted, well beyond her age group. Have you considered specialized art programs for the summer?" "I've thought about it," Claire admitted, "but most of those programs are expensive. There's a scholarship program at the Metropolitan Art Institute. Full funding for qualified students. Emma would be competitive." Claire made a note to research the program, already calculating. If Emma received the scholarship, wonderful. If not, Claire could anonymously fund her daughter's participation through the Foundation's youth development initiatives. Either way, Emma would have access to the training that would nurture her gifts. But she'd let the scholarship process play out first. Emma needed to understand that opportunities were earned, not simply purchased. That evening, Claire received an unexpected call from Catherine Wells. "Claire, we need to talk about your brother's bankruptcy proceedings. Something's come up that could affect you." Claire's stomach tightened. "What kind of something?" "Marcus hired a forensic accountant to review your father's business records as part of the bankruptcy asset disclosure. The accountant found evidence of large fund transfers from the business to accounts that don't appear in the estate inventory." "The trust accounts?" "Possibly. The transfers were made years ago and properly documented at the time, but the forensic accountant is flagging them as potential hidden assets that should be included in the bankruptcy estate." "Can they force disclosure of the trust?" "Not easily. The trust was established long before the bankruptcy, and the assets legally transferred to you years ago. But they can make noise, file motions, potentially drag you into their legal proceedings as a witness." Claire processed this, the careful edifice of secrecy suddenly feeling fragile. "What do I do?" "Nothing yet. Let them file whatever motions they want. The trust documents are solid. The transfers were legal, and you have no obligation to help your brothers avoid the consequences of their poor business management. But Claire, you should prepare yourself. If this goes to court, your inheritance could become public record." After Catherine hung up, Claire sat in the growing darkness of their apartment. 8 months of careful secrecy. 8 months of maintaining the appearance of modest circumstances while quietly transforming lives, potentially undone by a forensic accountant working for her desperate brothers. Emma found her there an hour later. "Mom, you okay?" Uncle Marcus hired someone to investigate Grandpa's finances. They might have found traces of the trust. Emma sat beside her mother, processing this. "Can they take it away from us?" "No. It's legally mine, has been for years. But they could force it to become public knowledge. Everyone would know about the money. Would that be so terrible?" Claire thought about this honestly. It would change everything. How people see us, how they treat us, what they expect from us. It would end our ability to help families quietly. And it would destroy what's left of my relationship with Marcus and Derek. We don't really have a relationship with them anymore anyway. No, but there's a difference between drifting apart naturally and having them discover I've been sitting on a fortune while they lost everything. They'd never forgive me. They laughed at you, Mom. They dismissed Grandpa's gift as garbage. They don't deserve forgiveness. The words were harsh, but not unfair. Still, Claire wasn't ready to abandon the hope that someday, somehow, her family might heal. Public revelation of her inheritance would eliminate that possibility permanently. "Let's wait and see what happens," she said finally. "Maybe the investigation won't go anywhere." But 2 weeks later, Catherine called again with an update. "Marcus has filed a motion in bankruptcy court claiming your father improperly transferred business assets to your trust in the years before his death. He's arguing those transfers should be reversed and the assets included in the bankruptcy estate to pay creditors." "Can he do that?" "He can file the motion. Whether it succeeds is another question. The transfers were made years ago, properly documented, at fair market value. But the judge will have to make that determination, which means a hearing, testimony, and likely public disclosure of the trust's existence and value." Claire felt the walls closing in. "When?" "Preliminary hearing is scheduled for next month. You'll need to testify about when you learned of the trust and what you knew about your father's financial planning. I didn't know about it until after he died. I found the documents in the tackle box after the will reading. That's your testimony, and it's truthful. But Claire, once this becomes public, your life changes. The anonymity you've maintained disappears. People will know you have significant wealth. People meaning Marcus and Derek. Among others, yes. That night, Claire couldn't sleep. She lay in the darkness, thinking about the carefully constructed life she'd built over 8 months. The foundation helping families. The modest apartment that allowed them to live comfortably without drawing attention. The gradual improvements that suggested a single mother slowly stabilizing her circumstances rather than a hidden heiress managing a fortune. All of it potentially undone by her brother's desperation and a forensic accountant's thoroughness. At 2 a.m., Emma appeared in her doorway. "I can hear you thinking from my room." Claire smiled despite her anxiety. "Sorry, baby. Trying to figure out what comes next." Emma climbed into bed beside her, a comfort ritual from when she was younger. Maybe it's time to stop hiding. Maybe Grandpa's test wasn't just about finding the money, but about what we do when people find out we have it. The observation was uncomfortably astute. Claire's father had structured the inheritance to remain hidden, yes, but he'd also written in his letter that the decision about whether to tell Marcus and Derek was hers to make. He'd given her the option, the choice, the agency to decide when or if revelation served a purpose. "What do you think we should do?" Claire asked. "I think we should keep being exactly who we are. Rich or poor, secret or public, we're still us. We still help families through the foundation. We still live modestly because that's what feels right. We still value what matters over what impresses people." "You sound very wise for 14. I have good teachers. Grandma, Grandpa, you." Emma nestled closer. "Whatever happens at that hearing, we'll be okay. The money doesn't define us. What we do with it does." The preliminary hearing was scheduled for a sweltering Tuesday in July. Claire dressed carefully in a simple business suit. Nothing expensive, nothing that suggested wealth. She met Catherine outside the bankruptcy courtroom, trying to control the anxiety that made her hands shake. Remember, Catherine coached, answer only what's asked. Don't volunteer information. Be honest but precise. This is a fishing expedition by Marcus's attorney. Don't give them anything to catch. Marcus and Derek sat on the opposite side of the courtroom with their attorney, a sharp-faced man named Kellerman who specialized in asset recovery. Both brothers looked worse than when Claire had seen them at Christmas, weight loss and stress evident in their faces. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Patricia Hernandez, called the hearing to order. "We're here on the matter of Bennett versus Bennett Estate Trust regarding allegations of improper asset transfer. Mr. Kellerman, you may proceed." Kellerman stood, radiating confidence. "Your Honor, we've discovered that the deceased, Thomas Bennett, transferred substantial asset from his business to a trust benefiting his daughter Claire Bennett in the years preceding his death. These transfers, totaling approximately $200 million, were not disclosed in his will and represent assets that should properly be included in the bankruptcy estate to satisfy creditor claims." Judge Hernandez looked to Catherine. Ms. Wells' response? "Your Honor, the transfers in question occurred over a 20-year period, were properly documented and taxed at the time, and were completed at arm's-length fair market value. They represent legitimate estate planning, not fraudulent conveyance. The trust was established long before any bankruptcy proceedings and is not subject to clawback provisions." Mr. Kellerman, when did these transfers occur? "The earliest was approximately 18 years ago, Your Honor. The most recent was 3 years before Mr. Bennett's death." "And when was the bankruptcy petition filed?" 6 months ago, Your Honor." Judge Hernandez made notes. "So we're talking about transfers that occurred years, even decades, before any suggestion of bankruptcy. How exactly do you argue these should be reversed?" Kellerman cleared his throat, recognizing the weakness in his position. "We believe the transfers were made with intent to defraud future creditors, Your Honor. Mr. Bennett knew his business was over-leveraged and systematically moved assets to his daughter's trust to protect them from legitimate claims." "Do you have evidence of this intent?" "We have the transfers themselves, Your Honor, and the fact that they weren't disclosed in Mr. Bennett's will, suggesting he was deliberately hiding assets, or suggesting they weren't part of his estate because they'd already been legally transferred years earlier, Judge Hernandez observed dryly. "Ms. Bennett, please approach." Claire walked to the witness stand on unsteady legs, was sworn in, and sat down. Her brothers stared at her from across the courtroom, their expressions a mixture of desperation and dawning realization. "Ms. Bennett," Judge Hernandez began, "when did you first learn about this trust?" "After my father's death, Your Honor. I found documents in a personal item he'd left me in his will." "You had no knowledge of it while he was alive?" "None, Your Honor. My father never discussed his financial planning with me." "And what was your relationship with your father like?" Claire chose her words carefully. "Complicated, Your Honor. We weren't close in recent years. He disapproved of my divorce and my choice to work in social services rather than the family business. Yet he left you substantial assets in trust. Do you know why?" He left a letter explaining his reasoning. "He wanted to ensure I had security, and he wanted the assets used for charitable purposes." Kellerman stood. "Objection, Your Honor. This alleged letter is hearsay." "I have the letter here," Catherine interjected, handing copies to the judge and opposing counsel. "It was found with the trust documents and clearly articulates Mr. Bennett's intentions." Judge Hernandez read the letter, her expression softening slightly. When she finished, she looked at Claire with something approaching sympathy. "Ms. Bennett, are you aware that your brothers are facing significant financial hardship?" "Yes, Your Honor. Have they asked you for assistance?" Claire hesitated. "Indirectly, Your Honor. They've asked if I knew about any hidden assets or accounts our father might have had." "And what did you tell them?" "That I received fishing equipment in his will." Which was true. The trust documents were hidden in a tackle box. Several people in the courtroom suppressed smiles at this detail. Judge Hernandez glanced at the letter again. "Mr. Kellerman, I'm inclined to dismiss this motion. The transfers were made years ago through proper legal channels. There's no evidence of fraudulent intent, and the statute of limitations on any potential clawback has long since expired. Your clients inherited the business and its associated debts. Ms. Bennett inherited assets her father had legally transferred to her trust years earlier. These are separate estates. But, Your Honor, I understand your clients are facing financial difficulties, but that doesn't give them the right to claim assets that legally belong to someone else." Motion denied. The gavel came down with finality. Claire felt relief flood through her, but it was short-lived. As she left the witness stand, she saw the look on Marcus's face. Not relief at the legal resolution, but shock and rage at the revelation. He knew now. They both knew. Their sister, whom they dismissed and mocked, had inherited a fortune while they'd gotten a business drowning in debt. Outside the courtroom, Marcus caught up to Claire before she could reach her car. $200 million? His voice shook with emotion. "You've been sitting on $200 million while Derek and I lost everything." The judge said $200 million. That was Kellerman's estimate, not mine. "Don't play semantic games with me, Claire. You found Dad's hidden fortune and said nothing while we went bankrupt. Derek joined them, his face flushed. We asked you, multiple times. We asked if Dad had other assets, if there was anything else, and you lied to us." "I didn't lie. You asked if I knew about accounts or assets. I told you I received fishing equipment, which was true. The trust documents were in the tackle box. That's a technicality, and you know it." Marcus spat. "You deliberately let us believe there was nothing while you were secretly sitting on a fortune." Claire felt anger rising to match theirs. "You want to talk about deliberate? You both laughed at me in the attorney's office. You called Grandpa's tackle box garbage. You dismissed me as a failure who got exactly what I deserved, which was nothing of value. You made it very clear what you thought of me. So this is revenge?" Derek demanded, "letting us suffer while you live in luxury." "I don't live in luxury. I have a 2-bedroom apartment and a 12-year-old car. I work for a living. What I do with Grandpa's inheritance is exactly what he wanted, helping people who actually need it." "We need it," Marcus shouted, drawing attention from people leaving the courthouse. "We're your family, Claire. We're drowning, and you have more money than you could spend in 10 lifetimes." "You had more than you could spend, too." Claire shot back. Dad left you a successful business. You're the ones who ran it into the ground with debt and poor management. That's not my responsibility to fix. Dad set us up to fail, Derek said, his voice breaking. He gave us a business he knew was over-leveraged while protecting all the real assets for you. He wanted us to lose everything. The accusation struck uncomfortably close to truth. Their father had given Marcus and Derek exactly what they'd valued, the appearance of wealth without the substance, setting them up for a lesson they'd only learn through failure. Dad wanted you to learn what actually matters, Claire said more gently. He tried to teach you for years, but you were too focused on status and appearances to listen. So he created a test, left you the business to see what you'd do with it. And we failed his test, Marcus said bitterly, while you passed with flying colors. I passed because I remembered what he taught me, to look beneath the surface, to value substance over appearance, to understand that treasure comes in unexpected forms. Claire gestured toward the courthouse. You fought in court to take away assets that were never yours because you couldn't accept that maybe, possibly, Dad's final lesson was about more than money. Easy to be philosophical when you're secretly rich, Derek muttered. I was philosophical when I was actually poor too. That's the difference between us. The three siblings stood in tense silence. Years of family dysfunction and competing values crystallized in this moment. Finally, Marcus spoke. I can't do this. I can't pretend to be happy for you or understand Dad's twisted lessons or accept that you're better than us. He turned away. Enjoy your fortune, Claire. I hope it brings you more happiness than Dad's approval ever brought any of us. He walked away without looking back. Derek hesitated, then followed, leaving Claire standing alone in the courthouse parking lot. Catherine approached quietly. That was brutal. That was inevitable, Claire corrected. From the moment I found the tackle box, this confrontation was coming. Better to have it now than let it fester for years. How do you feel? Claire considered this honestly. Sad, angry, relieved, vindicated, guilty. She laughed shakily. Pretty much every emotion at once. That's normal. Family and money create complicated situations. What happens now? With the publicity, the hearing was public record. Catherine nodded. Word will spread, yes. People will know you have substantial wealth. The foundation will face more scrutiny. Your privacy becomes harder to maintain. So we adapt. Like Emma said, we keep being exactly who we are. Rich or poor, secret or public, we're still us. That evening, Claire sat with Emma on their small balcony, watching the city lights emerge as darkness fell. She'd explained the hearing, the revelation, the confrontation with her uncles. Are they right? Emma asked quietly. Should you have helped them? I don't know, baby. Maybe I should have. Maybe that would have been the generous thing to do. But I also think Grandpa was right. Marcus and Derek needed to learn lessons that money would have prevented them from learning. What lessons? That wealth without wisdom is worthless. That status without substance collapses. That family means more than inheritance. Claire pulled Emma close. They were given a test, and they failed. Not because they lost money, but because they refused to learn from losing it. And us? What's our test? Figuring out what to do now that people know. How to use this money well when the whole world is watching instead of just us. Over the next few weeks, the publicity from the hearing rippled outward exactly as Catherine had predicted. An article in the business section detailed the bankruptcy proceedings and mentioned the trust dispute. A smaller piece in the local paper noted the unusual story of a father hiding a fortune in a tackle box. The foundation started receiving media inquiries. How was it funded? Who was the anonymous donor? Was Claire Bennett, founder and director, also the financial backer? Jennifer fielded the calls with practiced deflection. The Lighthouse Foundation maintains donor confidentiality as a matter of policy. Our funding sources are private, but privacy was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. Board members from other nonprofits called asking for meetings. Wealth managers sent congratulatory letters offering services. Even Claire's former in-laws reached out, suddenly interested in reconnecting with their granddaughter now that her mother's circumstances had apparently improved. It's like a switch flipped, Claire told Catherine during one of their regular check-ins. People who ignored me for years suddenly want to be my best friend. Welcome to being publicly wealthy. Everyone wants a piece, either for themselves or for causes they consider worthy. How do I navigate this? By staying true to the values that got you here. You didn't discover this inheritance by being calculating or strategic. You found it by remembering what your father taught you, by looking beneath surfaces, by valuing substance over appearance. Keep doing that. Claire took the advice to heart. When approached by other foundations seeking partnerships, she evaluated them based on effectiveness rather than prestige. When wealth managers offered services, she chose advisors who understood her commitment to social impact over pure returns. When long-lost friends and family emerged seeking connection, she politely but firmly maintained boundaries. The most difficult navigation involved Emma's school. The headmaster called requesting a meeting, his tone suggesting he'd heard about the bankruptcy hearing and connected the dots. Ms. Bennett, I wanted to discuss Emma's future at our institution. Given recent developments in your family's circumstances, I wanted to ensure you're aware of our legacy family opportunities. What kind of opportunities? Naming rights for new facilities, endowed scholarship funds, capital campaign leadership roles. Families with significant resources often find these vehicles allow them to make meaningful contributions to the school's mission while ensuring their children benefit from enhanced programs. The pitch was smooth, practiced, dressed in language about mission and values. But beneath it, Claire heard this same message. Now that we know you have money, we expect you to spend it here. I appreciate you thinking of us, Claire said carefully. But our philanthropic focus is on supporting families in crisis, not enhancing already well-resourced institutions. The headmaster's expression cooled slightly. Of course, though I should mention that Emma's continued enrollment could be affected by budget constraints that reduce our scholarship programs. We rely on generous families to maintain those opportunities. The implicit threat was clear. Donate significantly or Emma's scholarship might disappear, forcing Claire to pay full tuition and reveal her capacity to do so. I've always paid what I could afford for Emma's tuition, Claire replied evenly. That hasn't changed. If the school's financial model no longer works for families like ours, I understand. We'll find an institution whose values better align with our own. She left the meeting furious at the manipulation, but also clear-eyed about the reality. This was what public wealth meant. People seeing you as a resource to exploit rather than a person with agency and values. That evening, she discussed the meeting with Emma. Do you want to change schools? Claire asked. Go somewhere that doesn't know about the money? Emma thought about this seriously. I like my school. I like my teachers and friends. But if they're only nice to us now because we have money, maybe it's not the right place anymore. What would you want in a new school? Somewhere that cares about what you learn, not what your family can donate. Somewhere art actually matters instead of just looking good in the brochure. Emma paused. And maybe somewhere with more diversity? My school is pretty much all rich white kids. I like to know people from different backgrounds. The conversation led Claire to research alternatives, eventually discovering a public arts magnet school with competitive admission but no tuition. The school drew students from across the city based on talent and interest rather than family income. Diversity was built into its mission, equity central to its values. Emma auditioned with her portfolio and was accepted for the fall. When Claire informed the headmaster of their decision to leave, his response was coolly professional. I'm sorry to hear that, Ms. Bennett. I hope you'll reconsider. Though I suppose with your resources, Emma could attend any school she chooses. She's attending a school she chose, Claire corrected. One that accepted her based on her talent, not my bank account. That seems more aligned with actual educational values. August brought heat and the one-year anniversary of Claire's discovery. She marked it privately by returning to her father's house, now owned by strangers who'd purchased it from Marcus in the bankruptcy sale. She parked across the street, looking at the familiar structure with new eyes. A year ago, she'd stood in that garage, finding a tackle box she'd thought was garbage. Now she understood it was the most valuable inheritance her father could have given her. Not just the money, but the lesson about looking beneath surfaces, about recognizing value others dismissed, about understanding that treasure came in unexpected forms. Her phone rang. Jennifer, calling from the foundation office. Claire, we just hit a milestone. Application number 1,000. 1,000 families we've helped since we started. That's incredible. And we've got the funding to help 1,000 more. Maybe 10,000 more. Your father built something remarkable, and you're using it exactly as he hoped. After the call ended, Claire sat with that truth. 1,000 families helped. Children staying in homes instead of becoming homeless. Parents getting job training instead of staying trapped in poverty. Medical bills paid. Educational opportunities funded. Crises averted. That was what $245 million looked like when deployed with purpose. Not yachts or mansions or status symbols, but lives transformed, stability created, opportunities opened. Her father had been right. The strong ones deserve protection too. And Claire had proven strong enough to handle the inheritance he'd left, to navigate the complexity of sudden wealth while maintaining her values, to use money as a tool for good rather than a measure of worth. September brought Emma's first day at her new school. Claire drove her daughter to the converted warehouse building that housed the arts magnet program, watching Emma practically vibrate with excitement. "This is different," Emma said, taking in the diverse student body, the art installations throughout the building, the creative energy that seemed to pulse from every corner. "Good different. Amazing different." Emma grabbed her portfolio. "I'll see you this afternoon." "I love you, Mom." "Love you too, baby." Claire watched her daughter disappear into the building, surrounded by other students who shared her passion for art rather than her socioeconomic background. This was what the inheritance made possible. Choosing based on values rather than limitations, following interests rather than financial constraints, building lives shaped by purpose instead of circumstance. That afternoon, Claire met with Maria Santos to discuss expanding the Foundation's programs. "We've proven the model works," Maria said, showing Claire outcome data from their first year. Families that receive comprehensive support, not just emergency assistance, show significantly better long-term stability. Job retention rates of 82%. Housing stability at 90%. Children staying in school and improving grades. Because we're addressing root causes instead of just symptoms. Exactly. And now we have the track record to scale. We could expand to other cities, help thousands more families. Claire considered this. Expansion would increase visibility, make anonymity even harder to maintain. But it would also multiply impact, transform even more lives. "Let's do it carefully," she decided. "Pick one city, establish programs there, prove the model translates. Then consider broader expansion." "Chicago," Maria suggested. "Significant need, strong nonprofit infrastructure, manageable distance for oversight." Chicago, where Marcus moved after the bankruptcy, Claire remembered. "That's complicated. Is it, or is it perfect? Helping families in the city where your brother is struggling might demonstrate exactly what your father was trying to teach about using wealth wisely." The irony wasn't lost on Claire. Her brother, who'd lost everything through mismanagement and greed, living in a city where her foundation would soon help families avoid the same fate. "Okay, Chicago it is. But Maria, let's make sure our programs, they're truly accessible. I don't want Marcus to somehow benefit indirectly from foundation resources meant for people in genuine need. The application process is blind. We evaluate need and capacity, not family connections. If your brother somehow qualified and applied, we'd evaluate him like anyone else. He won't apply. His pride wouldn't allow it. But I want to be certain we're helping people who actually need it, not people who made poor choices with resources they had." Over the next few months, Claire worked with Maria and Jennifer to establish the Chicago program. They hired local staff, partnered with community organizations, developed application processes tailored to Chicago's unique needs. The program launched in November with a quiet press release announcing the Lighthouse Foundation's expansion. The Chicago Tribune ran a small story noting the new nonprofit focused on family assistance. Marcus never called. December brought another family-less Christmas. Marcus and Derek had made clear they wanted no further contact. Claire's former in-laws had stopped calling when she politely declined their renewed interest in Emma's life. The family that had once gathered for holidays, however dysfunctional, was now completely splintered. Just thus again, Emma observed on Christmas morning, opening gifts in their living room. Just us, Claire agreed. Is that okay? It's perfect. With a family that matters. The one we chose to be. They spent Christmas at the lake house, fishing from the dock with her father's old tackle box beside them. The vintage lures remained in the top tray, valuable but never sold. The false bottom stayed empty, its secrets long since revealed. But the box itself had become sacred, a symbol of transformation and wisdom and the understanding that treasure came in unexpected forms. As the year ended, Claire reflected on everything that had changed in 12 months. She'd gone from struggling single mother to secure heiress, from invisible to noticed, from isolated to connected with a network of families her foundation had helped. She'd also lost what remained of her relationship with her brothers, seen her private circumstances become public knowledge, learned to navigate the complex world of wealth management and strategic philanthropy. But through it all, she'd maintained her values. The modest apartment, the practical car, the focus on helping others rather than impressing them. She'd proven her father right about her strength, her wisdom, her capacity to handle inheritance that would have corrupted weaker people. What's next? Emma asked as they packed to return to the city. More of the same, I think. Help more families. Expand the programs. Maybe travel a bit, show you parts of the world beyond our corner of it. College planning, Emma added. I'm already thinking about art schools. Claire smiled at her daughter's forward thinking. You've got time for that. But I want to be prepared. Want to understand my options. Want to make sure I choose based on the right reasons. Just like her grandfather had taught, Claire thought. Looking ahead, planning carefully, choosing based on values rather than appearances. Then we'll research together, Claire promised. Find programs that challenge you, that value your talent, that will help you grow into whoever you want to become. As they loaded the car, Claire took one last look at the lake house. This place had become their sanctuary, their reminder of where they'd come from and what mattered. It would always be here, ready to welcome them back whenever city life became overwhelming. The tackle box sat in the trunk, carefully wrapped for the drive home. Dented, rusty, held together with tape. Still looking like garbage to anyone who didn't know its history. Still the most valuable thing Claire owned, not for what it had contained, but for what it represented. A father's wisdom, a family's transformation, and the understanding that true wealth was measured not in bank balances, but in lives changed, values maintained, and purpose pursued with unwavering commitment. 5 years later, Claire stood in the grand ballroom of the Chicago Hilton, surrounded by 800 people gathered for the Lighthouse Foundation's anniversary gala. She'd resisted this public celebration for months, but Jennifer and Maria had insisted. 5 years, 12 cities, over 15,000 families helped. The work deserved recognition, even if Claire preferred anonymity. Emma, now 19 and stunning in a simple black dress, stood beside her mother as the Foundation's youth ambassador. She deferred art school for a gap year to help launch Lighthouse's youth mentorship program, demonstrating the same commitment to service her grandfather had hoped to nurture. You look terrified, Emma whispered as the program director approached the microphone. I'm terrified. I hate being the center of attention. Then remember why we're here. This isn't about you. It's about them. Emma gestured toward the families filling the ballroom. Single mothers who'd escaped homelessness through housing assistance. Fathers who'd found stable employment after job training. Children whose lives had been transformed by educational support. Every person in this room represented the Foundation's impact, the tangible results of her father's carefully protected fortune. The program director began speaking, sharing statistics that still seemed impossible. $47 million deployed over 5 years. 15,000 families served. Employment retention rates above 80%. Children's educational outcomes improved across every metric. And now, the director continued, I'd like to introduce the woman who made all of this possible. She could have spent her inheritance on luxury, on status, on personal comfort. Instead, She chose to honor her father's legacy by transforming lives. Please welcome Claire Bennett. The applause was thunderous. Claire walked to the podium on shaking legs, looking out at hundreds of faces. Some were familiar from foundation programs. Others were staff members, board members, community partners. And in the back corner, almost hidden behind a pillar, stood two men she hadn't seen in 5 years. Marcus and Derek. Her brothers had come. Claire's prepared remarks suddenly felt inadequate. She'd written about gratitude, about her father's vision, about the importance of using wealth responsibly. But seeing her brothers here, witnessing what she'd built with the inheritance they'd lost, demanded different words. "Thank you all for coming tonight," she began, her voice steadier than she expected. 5 years ago, I discovered something unexpected in my father's fishing tackle box. Not just documents or money, but a letter explaining why he'd chosen me for this inheritance. He wrote that the strong ones deserve protection too, and that this wealth was a tool for doing good in the world. She paused, finding her brothers' faces in the crowd. My father also wrote that some people see money as something to take, while others see it as something to share. He spent 20 years protecting this inheritance because he understood that lesson, and he trusted me to learn it. Claire gestured toward the families in the audience. These are my teachers. Every single parent who applied for help, who swallowed their pride to ask for assistance, who kept fighting for their children despite impossible circumstances. They taught me what my father was trying to show me, that true wealth isn't measured in bank balances, but in lives changed, in families stabilized, in children given opportunities they deserve. Her voice grew stronger. My father hid this fortune in a tackle box that looked like garbage because he needed me to remember that treasure comes in unexpected forms, that the most valuable things are often dismissed by people who only see surfaces, that real worth is found in what you build, not what you buy. She looked directly at Marcus and Derek now. He also taught me that some lessons can only be learned through loss, through struggle, through discovering what actually matters when everything else is stripped away. I'm grateful for that wisdom, even though it came at tremendous personal cost. The room was absolutely silent. Tonight, we celebrate 5 years of the Lighthouse Foundation, but we also celebrate something more important: the truth that wealth is a responsibility, not a trophy. That inheritance should be used to lift others, not elevate ourselves. That the best legacy isn't what we leave behind in bank accounts, but what we build in human lives. Claire stepped back from the microphone to sustained applause. As the evening continued with dinner and testimonials from families, she watched her brothers from across the room. They didn't approach, didn't seek conversation. They simply observed, witnesses to the empire of good she'd built with resources they'd once dismissed. After the program ended, as guests filtered out, Marcus finally approached. He looked older, leaner, wearing a suit that was nice but not expensive. The arrogance she remembered had been replaced by something quieter, humbler. "That was a beautiful speech," he said simply. "Thank you for coming. I didn't expect to see you here. Derek and I both work for one of your partner organizations in Chicago, community outreach coordinators. We help families navigate social services." Marcus smiled without bitterness. Turns out losing everything taught us something about actually helping people instead of just managing wealth. Derek joined them, equally transformed by 5 years of struggle. "We wanted you to know that we understand now what Dad was trying to teach us, why he structured things the way he did. We failed his test," Marcus continued, "but failure was the only way we could learn what you already knew. That value isn't the same as price. That family means more than inheritance. That some lessons can't be bought." Claire felt tears threatening. "I'm glad you're doing work that matters." "We're doing work that makes a difference," Derek corrected. "Small difference compared to your foundation, but real. And we're doing it because we finally understand what Dad valued." Marcus extended his hand. "We're not asking for anything, Claire. Not money, not help, not even forgiveness. We just wanted you to know that your success doesn't diminish us anymore. It inspires us." Claire took her brother's hand, then pulled him into an unexpected hug. Derek joined them, and for the first time in 5 years, The Bennett siblings stood together without resentment, without competition, without the poison that had fractured their family. Emma watched from across the ballroom, tears streaming down her face. She pulled out her phone and took a photo. 3 siblings embracing, the tackle box visible on the display table behind them, dented and rusty and more valuable than anything else in the room. Later that night, back in their hotel suite, Emma showed Claire the photo. "This is what Grandpa wanted," Emma said. "Not just the foundation or the families helped or the money used wisely. This is children understanding what actually matters." Claire looked at the image, seeing not just reconciliation but transformation. Her brothers had learned through loss what she'd learned through discovery. That treasure came in unexpected forms, that value transcended price, and that the best inheritance was wisdom passed from generation to generation. "He would be proud," Claire said quietly. "Of all of you," Emma agreed. The tackle box sat on Claire's dresser, still dented, still rusty, still held together with tape. Still looking like garbage to anyone who didn't know its story. Still the most valuable thing the Bennett family had ever owned. Because it had taught them the only lesson that truly mattered. That real treasure isn't what you find in hidden compartments, but what you build with unexpected gifts, what you learn through impossible tests, and what you become when you finally understand that wealth is measured not in millions accumulated, but in lives transformed, families healed, and wisdom earned through the courage to look beneath every surface, always.